Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show. We are broadcasting live, as I said, across the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the live stream and links to the podcast and the links to our social media sites where we simulcast the radio show every day and all the other stuff. And of course, across all your favorite stations and translators across the state of Alaska. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the program, hour one of the big radio show today. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. Tuesday means the beatings will commence immediately. We're going to talk with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Here in just a few minutes, we're going to do the weekly top three. And this week's topics include the Alaska version of Waiting for Godot. Don't worry, I had to look it up as well. I had no idea what he was talking about. But it makes kind of sense. Then the new tax situation and opinion about investments and other things that are going on. Larry Persily, that guy, man, he can write some opinion pieces. I think he just spends his time doing just that. And then how a spending cap alone is problematic for the permanent fund dividend. I don't know why Brad says that, but we'll see what he has to say here in just a few moments as we pick things up with him in hour one. Then in hour two, we will kind of recap. We'll have maybe some of your thoughts on things, or maybe I'll just take a few minutes to give my regroup thoughts on what Brad just gave us. And then we'll talk with Chris Story, the man from Homer, who's going to come in for a bit of our positivity update. He is our betterment expert, and he's gonna give us a bit of life coaching, something along that line. So should be fun, should be good, should be all inclusive and ready to go. So we're going to talk about all that. And maybe we'll finish it up with your phone calls or something like that. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure. We're going to wang it at the end of the show is what I'm saying. We're going to wang it. You know what happens there. Things get hot and heavy and crazy. So that's the morning for us. The morning in a nutshell. So thank you for coming in and joining us. We appreciate it. Here we are 8 days away from the end of the session, and no end in sight. In fact, the headline from the ADN reads, "It's all in flux. Alaska budget disputes unresolved on the dividend and education funding." Yeah, it's not untrue. It is all in flux. The House and the Senate continue to spar over what they want to see in the final budget bill. What's interesting here is instead of passing bills and going at it through a conference committee, it's almost like they're just trying to do everything kind of behind the scenes, behind closed doors. It's a negotiation right now between the House and the Senate. And this article actually even mentions that typically the House and the Senate pass different versions of the budget and then resolve those differences through negotiations in what's known as a conference committee. So a single bill can then be passed through both legislative chambers and onto the government's desk. The House could simply approve the Senate's budget, which is known as concurrence, although the last concurrent vote happened with the Senate's budget in 1982. So that's not that's not gonna happen. More than likely not going to happen. So Gary Stevens and Kathy Tilton are trying to craft a compromise budget agreement behind the scenes without the Senate actually passing a budget, which, again, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. I'm not sure how that's going to go or why specifically, other than Bert Stedman definitely wants to have control of that Senate budget until the last minute for flexibility, which, basically means the bag of tricks may come out at the last minute to try and get something going on. I don't understand the appeal of doing this between the leaderships of the House without a conference committee. Maybe there's some kind of political reason for this that I'm not seeing, which, I mean, very possible that I don't see exactly what's going on here. But I find it interesting that instead of both of them passing a budget and then creating a conference committee to go over it with a group of people, it's essentially leadership hashing it out. Stevens and Tilton both say that legislative leaders are busy trying to craft a compromise budget agreement and adjourn by the 121-day constitutional deadline, which falls on May the 17th. Stevens said in a brief interview yesterday that it's all in flux right now. We're still talking, so that's good. I don't know. Sitka Republican Bert Stedman, who manages the operating budget in the Senate, has been firm on saying that the Senate would not support drawing from the constitutional budget reserve to balance the budget. In a brief interview Monday, Stedman said both legislative chambers were working together to find a compromise. He said, "You've got softening financial markets and softening oil markets. You need to be careful. There's a limit of reserve capacity. That's a concern." Talking about drawing from the constitutional budget reserve. But again, most of the time they didn't have a problem drawing from this over the last, just like all of a sudden now everybody's found a religion. So we'll have to see what happens. Of course, Calvin Schrage, the House Minority Leader, who gets quoted in every freaking article by the ADN. I mean, I guess he is the House Minority Leader, but it's like every time I turn around, says that he likes the Senate's budget because it doesn't require a draw from savings, funds core services, and includes $15 million for child care provider wages, which are, again, there's a lot of reasons in there not to necessarily like this, but he understands that there's just not enough votes to get this, get the House majority to support it. And in fact, you could see that there's a lot of finger pointing starting to go on. In fact, one of the things that I know Brad's going to want to talk about is this opinion piece from Cliff Grow, who was here to grow the PFD. Remember that? Grow the PFD. Cliff Grow's got an opinion piece, and the whole opinion piece just kind of sets the tone for everything that's about to occur. The first sentence in his opinion piece reads, and I quote, "The House majority is the biggest roadblock to a long-term fiscal stability for Alaska." The finger pointing right now. What did I tell you the other day? Or was it yesterday? All the days are blending together at this point. It must have been yesterday when I said, here's what's going to happen, that they're going to wind the clock down to the last few days. And then they're going to point at the House majority and say, you guys are the reason why this is all broken. I mean, regardless of the fact that the House majority already put in already put their own version of the budget in and have done everything else, it's going to be their fault that we don't have some kind of fiscal plan or that we have to have a government shutdown or whatever the problem is going to be. You could already see the finger pointing is underway. The House majority is the biggest roadblock to long-term fiscal stability for Alaska. So, and I'm like I said, I'm sure that Brad is going to go through that piece pretty exhaustively. But I mean, I remember when Cliff said he was going to be the one that was going to grow the Constitution. And Cliff goes through here and continues to talk about how, I mean, if you want a prime example of when we tell you that there's no political will to cut the size and scope of government, just read this piece. It is a masterclass on all the things that people are saying and have said, especially those that don't want to cut the size and scope of government. This is a prime example of every talking point that they're going to hit on why you just can't possibly stop the size and growth of government, and why we, in fact, are just we're cutting. I mean, we've cut too much already. This is, I mean, literally largest budget in state history last year, but we've already cut more, and we just need to put more back in. You cannot make this stuff up. You just can't do it. The spending limit formula that the House majority wants to put into law, this is from the article, the spending limit formula the House majority wants to put into law would decree a budget $100 million lower than the same budget that the House just passed. Every Alaskan needs to ask, what additional services does the House majority want to cut that its members are afraid to say out loud? I'll say it out loud. How about you consolidate the school districts? How about you do nothing but just consolidate the health care from the school districts? That would be a chunk of that $100 million. I mean, I could go on and on for days, Cliff. I'm not afraid to say the things that need to be cut. They may not be popular, but they could be cut, and we could still have the same. I mean, like the healthcare thing, for the love of Pete, the healthcare thing would be a good start. They would actually, in many cases, get better healthcare, and it would save money. But it would take money out of the hands of the unions, and nobody wants that, right? That's what we're told anyway. All right. We're going to continue. We got more coming up. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who I just realized I didn't send a thing to, so I'm going to do that right now. We'll be back with more. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with the weekly top 3 right after these messages.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. All right. I forgot to send Brad the link for this morning's show, which I just did. So I feel bad about that, but feels bad, man. I just wish we could send more and more money to the failing K through 12 ed system. Lol. That's David's sarcasm font, apparently not coming across this morning. I think legislators deserve a raise, says Bill. Oh man. That moment you realize you didn't hit that's ugly. All right. With the moments you realize you didn't hit the button on the coffee pot. That's so sad. That's so sad. Okay. Why no talk about the 15 cents gas tax? I don't know, Frank. I hadn't heard about the 15-cent gas tax, I guess. Let's see. The issue isn't the budget. The issue is the power, says Brian. Many conservatives believe the Republicans are working for them. Behind the doors negotiations help keep this myth alive. This session is Memorex. Man, you are dating yourself when you say Memorex. Most people don't even remember. Remember the old commercials where the guy was sitting in the chair and everything was being blown away around him, sitting in front of the stereo? And it was, is it live or is it Memorex? You are definitely dating yourself, Rick. Most of these young pups don't even know what Memorex is. All right. I did get the email with the prepper song. Thank you, Frank. All right. I see Brad is now, because I actually sent him what I was supposed to send him, is in the chat room. You know, whoa, that's some water pour in there. Now we all gotta go pee. That
was coffee, Michael.
Or whatever it was. I couldn't see it. It was liquid. And you are loud and proud this morning. So let me adjust your volume a little bit here. All right. So how are you this morning, my friend? What's happening?
I'm doing great. I'm awake. I've caught up with all the morning news after you kindly pointed out the article I should be reading. So I'm ready to go.
Yeah, that was an interesting article that came out early this morning. I don't know. I'm just reading some of this stuff and wondering what exactly is the political reasoning behind not passing the budget and moving it on to conference committee. Who's benefiting from that? Who's benefiting from the behind the scenes, holding all the budget bills in Senate Finance until the last second? Why wouldn't they just do a conference committee? It's not like the Senate's going to lose any power because there's going to be no minority members on it. It's going to be all majority members at that point. So I'm just trying to figure out what's happening there. Do you see something glaringly that I'm missing right off the top of my head?
Oh, not especially. I mean, it looks like Bert's trying to deal direct with Bryce and sort of bypass some others that he might have to deal with. But it's the last rumor I heard, and no doubt it's outdated. No doubt it wasn't true at the time I heard it anyway. But the last rumor I heard was that they were trying to do this through a concurrence, that the Senate was trying to pass a budget that would go to the House and be concurred with on the floor. That assumes all the minority members vote in favor of whatever the Senate sends over, and you get four from the majority that would vote with the minority members, and that Bert was trying to work that out.
Last time they concurred was 1982. That's a heavy lift, Brad. I don't know if that's even possible at this point. All right, well, we're going to continue here with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 kicks off here in just a second. Please like and share the show, like and follow the show page, do all the YouTube-y things and all that stuff. Here we go. Jumping back into it. Let's do it. All right, we're kicking things off here. Every week we go over 3 big items that we should be paying attention to in the state budget or in the legislative cycle, or outside of the legislative cycle. And we do it with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We like to call it the weekly top 3. We should get like a theme song or something for it. It's all good stuff. Brad Keithley joins us this morning to talk about the weekly top 3. I have to say, you hurt my brain a little bit, Brad, when you put in the weekly top 3. The first of the weekly top three is we're living in the Alaskan edition of Waiting for Godot. And I'm like, okay, I feel dumb. What's Waiting for Godot? And I spent 10 minutes down a rabbit hole in Wikipedia trying to figure out what that was about. But give us, tell us what you mean by that. Waiting for Godot is a famous play where two guys stand on stage and wait for somebody for both acts and nothing ever happens. But it's an interesting topic. So, Brad, give us your thoughts on this.
Well, it's a Samuel Beckett play. It's a widely produced, widely done play because it's fairly easy. There's like 5 characters in it, and the staging isn't much. It's like a tree and a bench, and these 2 characters sit on the stage in both acts. You're right, waiting for Godot, and various people sort of traipse by, and they talk about various things, and various people traipse by that they engage. And they just sit there for sit there. The first act, the tree, which is one of 2 props on the stage, is bare. In the second act, the tree has leaves. It looks like it's bloomed, and they're still waiting. And the play ends with them still waiting for Godot. Sometimes it's a boring play. It depends on how it's produced, but sometimes it's a boring play, and sometimes you really sort of try to delve in behind the various statements of the characters and try to figure out what the heck's going on, what Beckett had in his mind. And that came to mind, maybe for obvious reasons. It came to mind as I was thinking about the budget, talking about the budget and the fiscal plan this week. You're right. Cliff Grove's editorial is sort of top of mind when it comes to this. Cliff goes off on a however many words, 650 word rant about it's the House majority's fault. It's
he starts right out with it, doesn't he? It's the House majority's fault that we haven't done anything. And I'm like, what? Wait, weren't you the guy that was supposed to grow the PFD? I haven't seen any big shakes out of you this year, buddy.
Well, he's got a bill in, what is it, to increase the oil property tax, which wouldn't raise much. But Cliff's got a bill in. He'll claim he has a bill in, but I mean, you go through the full rant and it's nothing. I mean, it's a rant about how everybody else hasn't done anything and how nothing's moving forward. But you read each of these, you read Larry Pursley's column, latest op-ed, you read, the stuff that's coming out of, the Alaska Beacon, you read the stuff that's coming out of the ADN, the article you read this morning. It's sort of like Waiting for Godot, right? I mean, you have these various characters coming through the stage and, saying various lines. We're sitting there waiting for the fiscal plan or even the budget, even the FY24 budget to come through, and it just doesn't come through. I mean, we just keep sitting there and waiting for it. Ultimately, we will have a budget. Ultimately, the state will not go FY24 without a budget. So ultimately, we will have a budget. Godot, sort of mini Godot, will ultimately show up. But I'm not sure about the overall fiscal plan. I'm not sure that we ever have an overall fiscal plan show up. We just may stumble from year to year to year to year, and never get it done. We may go through various characters. We may go through various acts. We may go through various scenes. We may have various people, come across the stage and say various lines, but Godot may never come.
Well, this is something that Ben Carpenter said early on, that it's going to take. I mean, it may not get done this session, that it was going to be a heavy lift to try and get it all done. They're going through every bill this week to put them out on the House floor, out of House Ways and Means. Do you think that there's a chance of getting anything here in the last 8 days to at least pass into the next part of the session? Or
No, there's out of Ways and Means, maybe. Although I'll be honest, I don't understand the sales tax. I mean, the sales tax was heard a long time ago. If we're going to do this piecemeal, and they did I don't think they should have, but they did the spending cap piecemeal. We'll talk about that in the third segment. If they're going to do this piecemeal, why not do other pieces of it piecemeal? Let it collect someplace else. I maybe Ways and Means gets something out. I've despaired even of that. But this entire legislature is just, they're waiting for Godot. They're waiting for somebody else. Cliff's waiting for, the House majority to do it or somebody else to do it. Everybody's waiting for somebody else to do it. Bert says he'll do it. I mean, I guess we do have people who will put a plan on the floor, but it's just, as you sit there listening to the Beckett players, you sit there witnessing the Beckett play, you just sort of despair after a while, and you just wonder why. And that's exactly what's going on with the fiscal plan.
You wonder why they're waiting, or you wonder why you bought tickets to this? You knew exactly what's going to happen. I mean,
maybe the first time I wondered why they were waiting. Maybe the fifth time I saw the play produced, maybe I wondered why I was buying tickets. But it is a play that talks about, the inability or the despair that results from not being able to achieve something. In part, it talks about that, and that's really what's going on here. Let's go to the FY24 budget. There will be a budget. I mean, we will be financed, and the way it's going, it looks like it's going to be a compromise. I know what Kevin McCabe has said, that 50-50 is already a compromise. I absolutely agree with that, but it looks like it will have to be some sort of compromise between 25-75 and POMV 50-50. The bar got lowered down from the statutory formula down to POMV 50-50, and now, Bert's taking advantage of that and is pushing POMV 25-75 with equal vigor, and you got to have a budget. So where do you end up? If the House capitulated in terms of the Senate pushing through a budget that was 25-75, and somehow Bryce got the 4 votes, got a unified minority. I don't think he gets a unified minority, but for 25-75, but somehow gets a unified minority and gets 4 votes from the majority to form a concurrence vote. Then the attention shifts to the governor. Does the governor do something about that? Does the governor say, "Oh no, we're going to go back to the drawing board," or "I'm not going to accept 25-75. We're going to, try again in this process." But ultimately, we will have a budget. And ultimately, it looks like it'll be a compromise between those two boundaries. But that's not a fiscal plan. That's just another punt to get us through another fiscal year, and then we start talking about it. Then we start talking about it again, and maybe we have a special session, another act in Waiting for Godot, in Alaska's version of Waiting for Godot, and maybe something comes out of that. But there's everybody has gone to their trenches, right? I mean, everybody's just, Bert's sitting in his 25-75 trench. Some are sitting in the statutory PFD trench. Some are sitting in POMV 50-50. In the POMV 50-50 trench. Everybody's gone to their trenches, and there's no breakthrough thinking. I mean, the Senate bill comes up with triggers, right? That it's POMV 25-75, and you can get to POMV 50-50 if you use triggers. Okay, well, there's other ways to use triggers. Let's say, looking backwards, let's say we should have said, we're going to cut spending unless you raise revenues equitably across the board from all Alaskans. And then the pressure would have been on, do you want to have a tax, or do you want to increase spending? You can use triggers in a number of ways, and maybe there's a creative way to use triggers. Now that the Senate has introduced triggers, the 25-75 to POMV 50-50 trigger, maybe there's a creative way to use triggers to sort of work our way out of this. That is, if we don't increase revenues to offset PFD cuts, if we don't increase revenues, then spending gets cut, or spending gets capped, or something happens to spending. Maybe that's another way to think about this. But we've sort of locked in. I mean, like Godot, like the play, we've sort of just locked in on this continual repetitious cycle of, we're going to have a fiscal plan. My gosh, we need to have a fiscal plan, or Cliff's. What's the title of Cliffs of Peace? Enough talk of a fiscal plan. Alaska needs action. I mean, okay, yeah, everybody can rant about it, but nobody is coming up with a solution that gets a broad-based appeal, enough of an appeal to get through the two legislative bodies.
Well, and again, this is really nothing new. This is the SSDD, right? Same stuff, different day that we've seen each and every year from the legislature. And you say we're going to have a budget, but it's going to be interesting to see how strong the majority in the House stands on this. Do they push it to the very end? Do you think? Does it end up in do we end up in a potential shutdown or whatever else that is going on? I mean, the House has put their budget out. The Senate has refused to do so. I'm wondering how the House minority and the Senate majority are going to spin this together to say it's their fault, because that's what always happens, right? It's their fault that they're going to not have a budget, and the shutdown would be their fault, even though they've already put out the budget, several weeks ago, and they're just waiting for the Senate to do it. I mean, and does something come out in the last minute here from Ways and Means that is another part, or should they have done this as an omnibus, I guess is my question, because we've seen all these little parts and pieces that have come through Ways and Means. Were you saying that basically they should have done it as an omnibus to make to avoid the piecemeal effect of it?
Oh yeah, they should. I mean, I'll talk more about this in the third segment about the why the spending cap is a trap for the PFD. We've talked about it before on the show, but I'm going to go back to that. And that should have been a part of the solution. It should have been part of an omnibus. If they were going to push it forward as an omnibus, then it should have been, and they should. I mean, that's what the Fiscal Policy Working Group said. It needed to be all done at once. It should have been pushed forward as an omnibus, and all the pieces should have been there. I don't get why. Part of waiting for Godot is we're still waiting for the governor's sales tax. I don't get why the revenue piece of this has stalled. The governor said 2 weeks ago he was going to come out with the sales tax. It'd be finished on the Thursday or Friday of that week. It doesn't take that much to write a bill, in all honesty. And that should have been done before the governor even started talking about it. But he said it was going to be finished on Thursday and Friday. Well, that's now 10 days ago. And Ben has a bill in front of Ways and Means on sales taxes, and that has been heard, but it's still pending action. And so I don't understand why that piece of it is still spending. The Fiscal Policy Working Group said there had to be substitute revenues for PF. If we were going to restore the PFD, if we were not going to have deep PFD cuts, then we needed substitute revenues to pay for government. He was realistic about that. And I don't understand why that piece has stalled. So, there's a lot of moving parts in here, just like there's a lot of moving parts in the play, a lot of characters that come across the stage, but none of it settles down to a solution. Are we going to have a shutdown? Maybe as part of the negotiating tactic, we'll get close to that. I mean, the House majority seems fairly well resolved to hang on, but we got close to a shutdown before and it didn't happen. Somebody gave, and some side gave, and we finally got a budget and went forward with the year. I'm confident that we will have a budget for FY24. We won't start FY24 without a budget. So something's got to give. I'm not sure that we're going to. I'm not sure where the give's going to be. Other than the PFD, which is where the contention point is. So,
Brad, give us. I don't want to wait for Godot for the rest of the show today, so give me the tease for number 2 of the weekly top 3 before we go to break.
So Russell Long, who is a longtime senator from Louisiana and chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, U.S. Senate Finance Committee, at a point, at some point during his tenure as Senate Finance Chair, someone asked him to sum up tax policy in the U.S. And Long had this great quote. Basically, the quote is, "Don't tax me, don't tax you, tax that guy behind the tree."
Right.
And we're seeing all these editorials now pop up, or articles or pieces pop up now, or an ad in one case pop up with various people saying, "Don't tax me, don't tax my friends, tax the guy behind the tree." And the guy behind the tree is always middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. So
Right.
we're going to talk a little bit about how that's developing in the state.
Who happen to have the quietest voices, who happen to have the littlest influence or the littlest input on most of these things. That's the thing. Don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the man behind the tree. That's what it's all about. Back with more. We're going to continue. Brad Keithley, our guest. Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It's the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
So Donna Ardwin in the chat room points out one omnibus bill is not legally feasible because we have a single subject requirement in the state.
Pass them all at the same time.
Yeah,
that's not a. I mean, that's not a limitation.
I'm wondering if you could legally argue that fiscal policy is a single subject with many components, but I mean, this is a tough deal. And look, Ben Carpenter said early on, he said this is not going to be the effort of one single year. But we definitely need to get some things through first. And the first thing we should have gotten through was the PFD and then the spending cap.
See, that's the problem.
That's go ahead.
That's what the fiscal policy working group felt. I think recognized, and maybe the lesson we've lost again, is that everybody wants their thing first. You pass the PFD, protect the PFD, then we'll talk about other things. Well, once you protect the PFD, then the people who want continued spending, and there are people who want continued spending. Let's face up to the reality of the world. They're going to feel like they've been put under the rock. So you go through these things. Let's pass a tax first, and then your point is, well, heck, that just fuels increased spending, so that doesn't do any good. Let's pass spending cuts first. Well, the people who the piece that we're going to do through spending cuts, well, the people who are affected by that are upset by that. I mean, it's just everybody has their favorite. Yes, you're right. I mean, I have the PFD. We share, the fact that we want the PFD first. It's got to move. It's got to move all together, or it's not going to move. There are enough constituent groups. There are enough. This thing's fractionated enough that I think the fiscal policy working group recognized it all has to go at the same time. And it's sort of like, either you do that or nothing shows. Or either you do that or you just don't have a plan. You're having somebody who's trying to, bench press or, submit another guy. I mean, that's what Bert's doing with 2575, right? Bert's trying to, force it down. Down everybody's throat.
Well, he's very good at the coercion. He's been coercive for the last 4 or 5 years, as in the Senate Finance like that, doing the things, whether it was changing the funding source of the deal or making sure that you voted for his plan or you lost road project monies or whatever else. He's very good at the political strong arm tactics, and that's the problem. And I agree. I mean, I don't know, maybe, again, I'm not in the legislature. But to me, the fiscal policy would be a good single source. I mean, that would be a one rule. I mean, that'd be the one single requirement rule. It's got pieces and parts. We've done the same thing. If you're changing a bill on crime, it's got lots of moving parts inside of it, and it's still a single bill, changing multiple parts of the law to make it work. So I don't know why, arguably, you couldn't do that, as this is a full fiscal policy bill, and we're changing all these pieces and parts because it's a fiscal plan.
Or you can put in a condition. I mean, we've now learned we can put in conditions in legislation, right? Legislation X won't take effect unless legislation Y takes effect. So you just you cross conditions across all of the various pieces of it. That's not That to me is not, that's a technicality. That's not a reason to, to not try to advance them all at once. It strikes me that, this is, waiting for Godot is you just keep going in circles. You just keep waiting for Godot. So the same characters come back over and over and over. The seasons change. The leaves are on the trees in the second act, but it just keeps going in circles. And this is, to some degree, this is sort of the circle we're in. The Fiscal Policy Working Group was a great capture of what it takes to bring everybody together. Those people in that process, I think, tried to really come together on a solution and articulated what it took to take a solution. That we didn't do that. Nobody introduced legislation to do that. And so now we're on the circle again, and maybe we're out at the other end of it where, everybody says, well, let me pass this piece and then the other piece will catch up and all that sort of stuff. I think we're going to circle back and we're going to say, wait, we got to do all this stuff at once. But everybody wants to rant about it. I want to rant about it. You rant about it. Cliff Grow rants about it. Everybody wants to rant about it, but nobody really is bringing this stuff together in a way that comes up with an ultimate solution. And so we just sit here and
waiting for the leaves to pop out on the trees and to sit here some more. That's what it's all about. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to continue with the weekly top 3, and we will kick things off here in just a second. Please like and share the show. Like and follow the show page if you haven't. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube, why not? It doesn't cost you anything. Geez. It's pretty easy. 3,000 people on Facebook like the show, only 400 on YouTube. I just need a few more. Let's get it going on. Here we go. Okay, we're back here, the Michael Duke Show. Brad Keithley is our guest, and we're talking about the weekly top 3. We're up to number 2. Don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the man behind the tree. Brad says we've been playing that game for a while, speaking of waiting for Godot. Brad, this is the 2023 edition of that little meme. So what say you?
Oh, Michael, as I have been reading through, just following along what's going on, it started to strike me that the old Russell Long adage about don't tax me, don't tax you, tax the guy behind the tree started popping back up. There was an op-ed in the Peninsula Clarion that says it's in the Alaska Voices. Senate tax bills threaten critically needed community investment, and they're talking about the Hillcorp loophole of all things. God, it's opposing the Hillcorp loopholes by Rob Urbach, who is the head of the Iditarod. Hillcorp funded a bunch of the Iditarod this past year, and so Urbach's talking about it'd be horrible to tax Hillcorp. They might not support Alaska activities if you close that loophole and took away their $100 million in tax benefits that they're getting from the state. And then there was an opinion piece from our favorites, Jim Jansen and friends, that says Alaska has a bright future if we keep oil taxes competitive, opposing the change to the adjuster that's in the per barrel credit that's in the current tax code. And then sort of the topper for me was his Facebook ads by Americans for Prosperity, Alaska. Let your elected officials know, no to a statewide sales tax, no to a statewide income tax, yes to a spending cap, yes to the thing that benefits them. I'll explain it in the third segment, but yes to the thing that benefits them. No to everything else. And it's just, and all of these result in one thing: the Hillcorp op-ed, argument against changing the per barrel credits, the no to the statewide sales tax, no to the statewide income tax. They all result in one thing. The PFD takes it on the chin, right? Don't tax me. Don't tax, businesses. Don't tax the oil companies. Don't tax, the people who depend on the oil companies, the businesses the oil companies support. Don't tax high income Alaskans. Don't have a statewide sales tax. Don't tax me. Don't tax you. Don't tax my friends in the oil industry. Tax the guy behind the tree. And who's the guy behind the tree? Is middle and lower income Alaska families, our middle and lower income Alaska families, by taxing them through PFD cuts. What ICER's Matt Berman has said one more time, the most regressive tax ever. Use that instead. They don't say use that instead, but they're trying to foreclose all of the other options and say, this is where we need to land. So we got waiting for Godot, and while we're waiting for Godot, well, various characters are walking through various proposals on various individual proposals are walking through the stage. We've got Russell Long showing up and Senate, the old U.S. Senate Finance Committee, people saying, don't tax me, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax that guy behind the tree. And,
right.
And we're just full of it. We're just full of it right now. Every editorial, every op-ed. I mean, Cliff's got it. Cliff's op-ed has a version of that. Every person out there has got a plan that doesn't tax them. Taxes everybody else.
Right.
Takes money from everybody else, but doesn't tax them.
Well, and that's exactly it. I mean, Brad's just talking about, oil taxes that the people are standing against, that Brad says that we have needed, and as I said in the last segment, the ones that have the quietest voice, the least amount of influence, are those lower, those middle to lower income folks, because they don't, especially the middle income folks, they don't have any skin in the game. They're not receiving state services on one hand, and they're not receiving state contracts on the other hand. So they're the ones that are getting squeezed in the middle, and that's where it all comes from. We need a full fiscal plan, and the fiscal plan includes oil taxes and changes. You I'm sure have been lambasted by many in the oil industry for supporting the Hillcorp change and talking about the per barrel credit change and supporting those kind of things. I'm sure you've taken it on the chin on those guys as well. But that's the thing. I think when you're doing the right thing, everyone hates you, Brad. That's kind of the conclusion that I've come to in the last few years.
The funny thing about my friends in the industry, yes, they do take issue with me on the per barrel credits. They will try to defend the per barrel credits. I've not had anybody from the oil industry try to defend the Hillcorp loophole. The closest I've had is somebody said, well, that was the tax code at the time Hillcorp made the acquisition, and so Hillcorp ought to be able to rely on the tax code that was in effect at the time of the acquisition. That was the deal that Hillcorp relied on when they came into Alaska. Oh, baloney. If you're in the oil industry, one thing, laws change, regulations change, taxes change, change is inevitable. When you do a deal, you do a list, you do two lists of things that are absolutely deal breakers that you've got to have in order to make the deal. And a list of things that would be great. It'd be a windfall if I got these additional things. And believe me, the preservation of the Hillcorp loophole, the preservation of the exemption for S corps in the oil industry from the oil industry corporate income tax. Believe me, that was on Hillcorp's wish list. Oh my God, we get $100 million extra because we were able to, convince people to keep this going. I've not had anybody in the oil industry, to be very honest. I talk to them all the time. A lot of friends still in the industry. They'll debate me all day long on the per barrel credits. That's a debate to have. But nobody's debated me on the Hillcorp exemption. And yet we still have that damn exemption, that damn loophole on the book. So it's a classic case of don't tax me, don't tax you. This op-ed by the guy from Iditarod is just infuriating because it's, look, Iditarod's getting benefits out of this exemption. Hillcorp likes this. Hillcorp, well, why do you think Hillcorp's spending that money? So you'll write op-eds like that. So you'll write op-eds defending it.
Yeah.
Guess who's really paying for the Iditarod? It's middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. Why is that? Because the only reason Hillcorp's paying you is because they get that extra $100 million. Why do they get the extra $100 million? Because we're taking it out of PFDs instead. So instead of writing a thank you to middle and lower income Alaska families who are essentially funding through, the absence of closing the Hillcorp loophole or funding the Iditarod, instead of getting a thank you to middle and lower income Alaska families, we get this damn defense letter of the Hillcorp loophole. It's
well, the subheading of it is Hillcorp Alaska's role as a major sponsor of our race is a source of great pride. I'm sure it is a source of great pride to get, $1 million from Hillcorp or whatever it is that you're getting for the race. I'm sure that is great pride. But again, who's paying for it in the long run?
The rate of return on that, give me $1 million to Iditarod, you get a letter in defense of $100 million. I mean, that's a pretty good rate of return on that investment by Hillcorp.
Yeah, not a bad rate a return. Less than 2 minutes, Brad. Do we have time for number 3? Can you give me a tease at least?
Yeah, I can give you. Number 3 is very simple, and we've talked about this before. The spending cap contemplates at a lesser rate, but contemplates spending going up. To a lesser rate, but still contemplates spending going up. Revenues from traditional sources, from oil and traditional taxes, are going down. That gap, even with the spending cap, that gap has to be filled by something. If we don't have a comprehensive solution that has substitute revenues for PFD cuts, that gap gets filled increasingly by PFD cuts. As spending continues going up at a lesser rate, but as spending continues going up and revenues continue to decline, that gap gets filled by growing PFD cuts. You need a comprehensive solution that addresses the PFD issue. If you don't have it, a spending cap alone just leaves the PFD out there to be picked off on an ongoing basis year after year after year.
Yeah. I could see it. Again, that's why I said earlier on, if we had to prioritize, I thought the PFD had to go first and then the spending cap, not the other way around. Otherwise, we're going to be in big trouble. But again, how do we get them all together, especially with the one subject rule and all that other kind of stuff?
Don't let that trouble you. There are ways to deal with that.
All right. Well, I'd like to know more about that. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Thank you, Brad.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we got more coming up. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. I mean, that's really the problem. We see these things coming out piecemeal, and this was what I was seeing and I was thinking about as, House Ways and Means has pulled all these different pieces together. I mean, I admired the tenacity of a Carpenter and company for doing all this, but I realized that all it would take is for one bill, the group to come, the anti-group to come together at one point and kill one component of this to really be able to submarine a big chunk of the whole fiscal plan, because that's all they need to do. They could let everything else pass and have that one bill and just riddle it full of holes. And the next thing you know, we're kind of stuck back where we started.
Well, and the other way to do it, Michael, is what's happened with letting the spending cap out. The other way to kill a comprehensive solution is to let one piece go first. And I know the chamber's in favor of the spending cap, and I can explain why the top 20% love that. But let one piece go first and get out there, and then everybody says, "Well, we got a fiscal plan. We've accomplished this. We've achieved a fiscal plan. We've got, Bert will say, I've got 25-75, and then you got a spending cap that caps spending. We're done. You guys can continue talking about, changes to the PFD. You guys can continue to talk about substitute revenues for PFDs, but we're done. We got the one piece we wanted. The reason the chamber wants a spending cap is because they're concerned the government will continue to grow. And even after you consume all of the PFD, which they don't care about, but even after you consume all of the PFD, then there will be a push for taxes, and they want a spending cap to prevent against that situation, against spending going so high that even after you consume the entire PFD, that you'll need additional revenues. So the spending cap is basically to keep the spending levels within the range of consuming the entire PFD, but still but not needing additional revenues. That's why they want a spending cap, and letting that go first. I think it's just a mistake, because you're going to get out there, and if that passed, and if the Senate would adopt it, heck, they'd love it. Because it's chamber supported. That if that gets out there and passes, the don't tax me, don't tax you crowd are ecstatic. They've got protection against the downside of needing additional revenues beyond the PFD, and they've got the PFD trapped in there in a way that it's going to be the filler for whatever the shortfall is between the spending cap and traditional revenues. Horrible to let that thing out by itself. But nonetheless, that's what we've done. And so there's two ways to kill it. One is to pick off your least favorite part of it and say, yeah, we can pass the rest of this except for that. Or the other way to kill it is to let one piece of it out, one piece that, the top 20% out, and pass that, and then, just forget about everything else. Just keep everything else bottled.
Well, and again, with your, talking about your incline and your decline thing, the problem is that it's going to, by its very nature, grow beyond what the PFD has available. So it's almost inevitable that there's going to be a tax of some kind down the road, right?
Well, I mean, not if you tighten the spending cap in a way so that it never outgrows the PFD. And I've done like a 10-year projection. I haven't gone out, 25 years, but I've done a 10-year projection. And the way the spending cap is designed, the way tying it to gross state product, the way the spending cap is designed, it probably doesn't outstrip the PFD within the 10-year period. Now, the PFD can't stay at 25.75. You're going to go inside the 25% to fund it. But that's not a problem, because 25.75 is only a statute. So you just ignore the statute again. We did that last week on the show. 25.75 becomes 20.80, becomes 15.85, becomes 10.90, and then but the chamber won't help you at that point. Nobody cares for middle and lower income Alaska families at that point, because they got what they want. They've got the upside cap of the spending cap. It's just the PFD that gets trapped in there and gets used. So that's why you need a comprehensive solution. That's why you need everything at once. That's why you need the cross ties, everything conditioned on everything else moving forward. And the fact the House has moved forward, the House Ways and Means moved forward on the spending cap, and now it looks like House Finance is prepared to move forward on the spending cap, and then that will become the negotiating tool against the Senate. Yes, we'll accept 25.75 if you accept the spending cap. The Senate's going to go, yeah, what a deal. The fact we're on that track, I think, is just, I think it's just horrible, and it's problematic that Ways and Means let the spending cap out on its own.
Well, I'm interested to see, you said, because when I said it should have come out all together instead of piecemeal, and you said that is fixable. I would like to know exactly how. I think it was Tom McKay that said something about Ledge Legal had already, ruled on the single subject rule or something like that. But I mean,
you cross-tie the bills. I mean, if you pass this, even if you pass this, it doesn't take effect unless you pass that. And there's risk to that. I mean, I guess an amendment on the floor could take out that cross tie, but at least have them all up at once. At least give it a fighting chance. The fact you've let one out, the fact you've let the spending cap out, the Chamber of Commerce preferred spending cap out first, is we've already started going down the bad road. You've already done damage to the concept of everything tied together.
Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. I appreciate you being part of it today. As always, a thought-provoking conversation, and we appreciate you doing it with us.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that brings us over to hour 2. Time to get things ready to rock and roll. Let's get going on, shall we? The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hour 2 of the big radio broadcast this morning, and we are getting ready to go, and we're going to be diving into this here in just a few minutes. Our next guest coming up is going to be Chris Story, the man from Homer, who's going to give us a little bit of insight into some positivity, some betterment for us. That's what it's going to be about. And we appreciate him coming. He's going to be joining us here in about 10, 12 minutes or so. We'll be picking that thing up, and we'll be seeing what we had to say. Just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets for the weekly top 3. And some hard truths in there. I am still hopeful that stuff can come out of the Ways and Means Committee, and we may get some pieces and parts here. But I am concerned, and I have been concerned from the very beginning, as I said. I think I actually said it during the commercial break, so you folks didn't hear it on the radio, but I am actually concerned about the fact that as we bring these pieces out of the Fiscal Policy Working Group plan, the 6 or 7 components of it, which include, a spending cap, some cuts, an oil tax increase, a sales tax, fixing the PFD, a spending cap, all these pieces came out. And as each one comes out, my fear is that the powers that be, the folks that want to continue with the business as usual, that want to continue with the, spending on government services at the expense, or spending on the private sector, the public sector at the expense of the private sector, that all they have to do is come together against one key component of this. And that could be the PFD, or it could be a spending cap, or it could be on the cuts, or any one of those things. And they could put the entire plan in jeopardy. And that has been a concern to me from the very beginning. Now, Donna Arduin commented in the chat room early on that because we were talking about why didn't this just all come out at once? And Donna Arduin talked about that the omnibus, that you couldn't do an omnibus bill, which is where they put everything together into one bill and put it through, because there's a single subject requirement in the state law that basically says you can't have a something that is too broad and everything else. Although that single requirement has not stopped things like ranked choice voting and some of the other stuff, right? Because that had 26 pages of changes in it for a single subject kind of thing. I'm wondering if you could make the argument that a fiscal solution, that a state long-term fiscal plan is in and of itself a single subject that has many moving parts. I think that could legally be made as an argument. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV, but I think that, if you are looking for a single subject, that would be the subject to place everything under: a long-term fiscal plan for the state that has many pieces. We saw the same thing in, SB 91 and other things. It was a crime bill, but it had lots and lots of moving pieces and parts of it. With lots of different changes that were made to laws underlying all that stuff. And since all of this deals with fiscal policy, each one of those changes would still deal with fiscal issues. I wonder if you could make the argument that would be the single rule. I would like to see that. The whole problem is, of course, is that there's just not the political will, it seems like, to get these things done. I mean, we've got a whole group of people in the Senate who basically just want to see the continuation of what's been going on for years, which is essentially spend, regardless of where the money is going or what's coming from. We're going to take the PFD, and with the appetite for spend that we have now, it's going to be it's not going to be long where we will have all of the PFD taken and then potentially new taxes on top of it. But even if all they did was take the PFD, and as Brad said, he did, he said he extrapolated it out with the new spending cap that they're talking about right now. Even if they take the PFD and don't institute any new taxes, the impact on the Alaska economy is tremendous. I mean, if you take that $1 billion out of the Alaska economy and continue to do so for years on end, what is the extrapolated effect on the economy over a 10-year period? That's a huge problem. A huge problem. Now, Tom McKay and Rob Myers are both commenting in the chat room that because some pieces of the fiscal policy working group's plan are statutory and some are constitutional, you can't batch them together because you can't mix bills and constitutional amendments in the same piece. Okay. All right. Okay. I see that. Can you combine constitutional amendments? Can you combine them into one bill and the statutory framework into another bill? I mean, I'm just looking for anything because again, my fear is that if you have 8 pieces or 7 pieces or, whatever the number is, all they have to do is stop one to fudge up the whole thing. Right? That's all they have to do. And that's my fear, is that there is a group of folks in there who like the business as usual. They like the power that they've amassed to themselves. They like the fact that they are protecting the government spend over everything else. And all they have to do is stop one piece to basically railroad this thing into oblivion. Now, I don't know. I don't know if, I just don't know if there's enough horsepower behind the people that want a good sound fiscal plan for the state long term. I just don't know if there's enough horsepower to get that over the line. I don't. I mean, again, folks, remember, I hate to remind us of this, but we're in the minority. The conservative, smaller government people in this state are in the minority. And we keep getting reminded about that all the time. I mean, we send back people who say the right things to Juneau, who once they get down there, their true colors show out, and they're not really small government people, that they're not really interested in that. They said they were to be able to get your vote, but when it all comes down to it, they're happy to go along to get along. So, I mean, we are in the minority here. And unless we can educate our friends, neighbors, relatives, and other folks to send down people there who are true and really do want the same things that we want, we're going to be stuck in this untenable situation of government is just going to continue to grow. government's going to continue to grow to the point to where we have no voice, no way to fix it, no true ability to stop the madness that's going on, the damage to the private economy. I mean, look at what we talked about. Go back and watch the shows where we've discussed this with Rob Myers. You know, the fact that the government of this state has continued to grow at an 80% greater rate than the private economy is telling. I mean, it will eventually reach a tipping point to where the velocity of that is just greater than anything that we can do on the private sector. It's it's definitely a problem. And honestly, I don't have any short-term solutions for this. I mean, again, we talk about the charter of changes. We talk about some of those things. Those are more overall long-term things that can help bring the state back. But as they continue to do their business down there in Juneau, in the quiet little corridors, basically out of sight of the public, with the only people who are visiting them and seeing them and counseling them every day are the NGOs and the special interests and the unions and those groups who are down there, not private citizens getting down there to be able to participate in these things. They're in an echo chamber hearing exactly what they want to hear, which is keep doing it because we all need that sweet, sweet lucre that you're passing us. I mean, this is the whole thing with Rob Urbach. This article from Rob Urbach from the Iditarod. How dare you go against Hillcorp and do all this kind of stuff because they're a major sponsor in our race. And that's it. Well, great. So again, what you're saying is not in my backyard. Sure, you can cut. And this is the problem that Dunleavy had in his first year when he put that first budget together, is that everybody was like, well, yeah, we all need to cut. I mean, we need to cut, but not my piece. Don't cut my piece. You know, we saw the Republicans. They didn't uphold the governor's vetoes. They didn't want to stand strong because something in their district may have had to give, whether it was there's Delana Johnson with the Department of Ag and some of the other things that are out there. I mean, I'm sorry. If it is truly needs to happen for the long-term fiscal stability, we're all going to feel a little pain. But that's the thing about, curing wounds or it's like the debridement that has to happen when you get a wound that's got a bunch of dead stuff on it and everything else, and you got to patch it up. Well, you can't just throw a Band-Aid on it because it'll get infected and the necrotic and blood. So you got to go in there with a scrubby and some tweezers and a razor, and you got to cut all the bad stuff out. Everybody's got to feel a little pain if we're going to fix it in the long term, if we're serious about it. If we're not, then let's just talk about cooking and food and movies from now on. If we're really not going to fix it. If there's really not just if this is all we're going to do is just talk about it and nothing's ever going to happen and you're not going to reach out to your legislators and say, as much as I support Project X or Department X or whatever, and I might even benefit from the things that Department X are doing or Project X is doing, I think that we need to cut back on things. And so I'm willing to give a little bit. I mean, because if the governor does surprise us all and stand up with his red pen on this budget, and I would be surprised if he does, quite honestly, based on past performances indicative of future results, if he does stand up on this, then I would be surprised. But if he does happen to stand up on it, then he needs support from legislators who have heard from their constituents, constituents who have said, we're willing to all take a little bit of pain to cut the size and scope of government. But as I said earlier, if you want a masterclass on why people are going to tell you they couldn't possibly cut the government, just go read that opinion piece in the ADN from Cliff Grow. Because he tells you, oh, we've cut the budget. We've cut state services by $1 billion. We've done all this stuff. We couldn't possibly cut a single thing. Okay. I mean, largest state budget in history last year, but all we've done is cut. One of these two things is inconsistent with the truth. Maybe we should take a look at that and start to discuss. What do you say? All right, Chris Story's up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's get Chris screwed up. Fudged up? Yes, I said fudged up. He's giving me a hard time on he's texting me, giving me a hard time on the thing. All right. Let's do this. Hey, look at that. Works like a champ.
It just seemed so hostile.
So hostile when I said fudged up. I mean, I could have said something else, but I decided that I couldn't take the FCC violation. So I didn't want to pay that fine.
I just really had to question everything I know about you or thought I knew.
Yeah, I'm sure. Exactly. Yeah. So how are you, my friend?
You consider yourself, this is totally off topic, but are you a people pleaser, or are you the kind of guy that's like, if somebody got really upset with you for actually saying that, which I'm not, but if they had, would it bother you? How much of a people pleaser is Michael Dukes? People want to know.
No, I wouldn't have bothered me at all. Quite honestly.
So you don't live.
I don't live to please people. I mean, I want people to be happy. Don't get me wrong, and people that direct me. But if somebody sent me an email and say, "I'm so disappointed and mad at you that you use the term fudged up instead of and I'd just be like, "Boy, I'm really sorry that offended you, but it was better than the alternative." That probably would have been my response via email. It was better than I would have wanted to say.
Right. There's a lot of people. I was just and the reason I asked is I was just reading an article yesterday about Anthony Bourdain. I don't know why, but it came across the news feed. I email subscriber list, whatever. And I was, that's interesting. I read a little bit about him, and he was incredibly oriented towards people pleasing, but also prone to deep, deep melancholy. I mean,
right.
That's a really dangerous combination right there.
Oh, I imagine that is probably, and it probably led to his ultimate demise in that regard. I mean, I want people to be happy, like I said, but I'm also going to, in my mind, tell it like it is. And if I've offended you, I'm sorry that I've offended you, but I'm not going to retract what I've said unless it's blatantly wrong. I have said things that are blatantly wrong, and I've come back and retracted it or corrected it. But for the most part, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And if it offends you, move on down the dial, Susie. That's all I can say.
Right.
That's all you can do.
Exactly. It's like Zig Ziglar used to teach other people that were wanting to become speakers. It's like, don't speak to the one person who's not paying attention to you in the front row. It's not for them. Ignore them and speak to the people that are listening. It's like it's not for everybody. It can't be for everybody. But when you combine that concept with being a perpetual people pleaser, it's like I say, it just leads to, I think, unhappiness and unrest.
Yeah.
And a lot of negativity.
Well, I'll tell you, it's if you're feeling unrest and negativity, all you got to do is go to Homer. It'll all be alleviated for the most part until you leave. And then I got ultimately depressed when I left.
Right. That's our greatest sales pitch.
Exactly. Come to Homer, be happy, leave sad. I mean, that's kind of what it's all about.
It's like the Hotel California.
Yeah.
Mentally, you can never leave.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't see you. What happened to you? Huh?
I know, man. I worked. I got to tell you, season's kicked off. I worked Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and I'm not bragging. It just happens to be the season. But yeah, I missed you. How was your turnout at Captain's?
Oh, it was not bad. A couple people showed up. We were just chatting and talking. Nice. It was just nice.
It's a great place.
A little bit of cup of coffee and just hang out and do our thing. Captain's Coffee was super nice about it, so it was good. What's our topic for today, brother?
Twin Peaks of Imagination.
Well, I like Twin Peaks. The owls are not what they seem. I'm sorry, that's a Twin Peaks reference for the television show Twin Peaks. You're not talking about the television show. No, you're not. Okay.
No, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? Oh man, good 90s television. All right, the Twin Peaks of what?
Imagination.
The Twin Peaks of Imagination. All right. Hold the line. I'll be right back to you here. Coming into it. I've got a good halibut recipe, says Lisa and Gary. I have a good halibut. I've got a halibut recipe that's to die for. Oh man, I made it all the time. It's actually good with any white fish. One of my favorites. Although Hockda says temper a halibut with garlic aioli. Ooh, yeah, that also would not suck at all. Definitely. All right, let's get to it. And jump in. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. Okay, we're into it now. This is our betterment segment. Yeah, that's where we get a little bit of life coaching from the Tony Robbins of Alaska, the betterment expert, the man, the myth, the legend in his own mind. Chris Story joins us this morning. Hello, my friend. How are you?
What a build-up. I'm fantastic, Michael. Thank you.
Hey, well, I appreciate you coming in and talking with us
It's
today.
a great filter. Truly, it's not a build-up. I understand what you're doing. It's a filter. You're just filtering out people that this isn't for.
Yeah, you know,
reference to Tony Robbins.
I know. It is like that, you know, and I made this comment last week after you got off the show because we started off at the beginning of the segment with a big number of people. And by the time I got done with the segment, it was a smaller number of people. And I said, look, this is for me. I'm 100% honest with the listeners on this. I have you on this show, not for them, but for me, because I always glean something out of what you're saying. And I think some people listen to the show because, I don't know, they want to hear the agitation or the anger, or they want to hear about the problems, what's going on, but they never want to hear about the solutions for personal growth or personal betterment, which is what you bring to the show every week. And so you asked me early on during the break, you said, am I a people pleaser? Do people, I said fudged up earlier, and you're like, you think people are going to be mad about that? And I basically told you that I really don't care if people were upset about it because it was better than the alternative phrase that I was thinking of using. And so, you know, it's the same thing with you coming on the show. This is for me. If nobody else if every listener right now listening to the sound of my voice turned off their radio or shut down their computer or did whatever, I mean, that would be sad, but it wouldn't matter to me because I got out of it what I needed, because you are going to give me something with your topic today, which is the Twin Peaks of Imagination. I mean, whatever that is, I'm sure I'm going to get something good out of it. So take it away, Mr. Story. Take it away.
Well, just as a follow-up on that point, I think that there's sort of like two audiences. I think we go to the radio for one form of either entertainment, or it's a way of it's just a different kind of partnership than when we go to a social media chat room. I think we go to for a very specific and precise reason. And oh, wait a minute, you're off topic. Okay, I'm going to move on and some squirrel, and we're over here. It's two different audiences. So I think that your radio audience is deep relative to these things that you and I talk about, because I run into people around the state, you know, that listen to you, who either recognize my name and or say, oh, yeah, you're on Michael Duke's show. So I know that from the radio perspective, there's probably more tolerance for a different kind of conversation than those show up to chat and almost as a third rail hear themselves.
Right,
well,
right.
To an extent. Not everyone, but to an extent. But anyway, relative to the topic today, thank you for having me, Mr. Dukes here. The Twin Peaks of Imagination. So Napoleon Hill, in his master work, Think and Grow Rich, said there's two types of imagination: synthetic and creative. And the synthetic type of imagination is really reinventing something. I was going to say reimagining, but that's been so twisted over the life. Ever since we decided to reimagine policing, I've decided that's an irrelevant term. So to reinvent the mousetrap. To come up with a better mousetrap is essentially what he referred to as synthetic imagination, rearranging or making a new concept out of something old. And then there's creative imagination. And this he referred to as more divine, more inspired, more out of whole cloth, brand new, never even considered before, a type of imagination. And so I think, and I think this is a bit of a challenge for each of us, is to recognize if you're not that divinely inspired, like today in today's parlance, it'd probably be Elon Musk. Like, wow, what a genius, and he's so inspired. But truly, if you look at everything he's done, he's just reinvented how things are done, from PayPal to electric vehicles to rockets to whatever he touches. It's more of a combination of, yes, creating something new, but not completely out of whole cloth. It's just a reinvention. I think each of us have that opportunity to combine these two types of imagination into something more powerful for ourselves in the world. And it's a bit of a use it or lose it. If you don't use your imagination, it's going to become dormant and sort of atrophy. So I'm just encouraging us all to recognize, even if we don't feel divinely inspired, you're not Da Vinci drawing a helicopter in 1642 or whatever, and just completely imagining something out of the blue. It's okay. You have this synthetic imagination and a creative to an extent, and you can combine the two and come up with some amazing things. And it's just a great brain exercise, if nothing else, and it's fulfilling, no matter where you go with it.
And I think you're right. I mean, we have a tendency to, it's like I like your atrophy comment, because again, it's like anything. It's like your imagination, like anything else, like willpower. If you don't exercise it, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And then, one day you found that you're just an automaton going back and forth to work and doing the same thing and not really creating anything in your mind or doing anything else. It's one of the reasons why I picked up a hobby a couple, 3-4 years ago, where I was doing like some crafting. I was building some dioramas and painting figures and doing some things like that. It's something I hadn't done in probably 30 or 40 years, that kind of hands-on stuff. But I found a deep satisfaction in it, simply because it was exercising that creative part of my brain that I hadn't touched on in a while. I get creative when I'm doing reading or narrating or voice work or stuff like that, but I was looking for something a little more, and that's been great. You've got to be able to tap into that creative aspect of yourself, I think, in the long run, to be. I mean, if you found one common thread between all people who are successful, depending on what your definition of success is, I think you'll find that creative thread in almost all of them.
And you can wake it up. If you're hearing this and go, man, what have I done creatively? You can wake up that part of your brain. And for me, for example, I used to keep a notebook of board game ideas, and it literally says on the front of the notebook, board game ideas. And I love creating concepts.
So wait, you were creative except for the title of the notebook. I mean,
exactly.
Instead of saying something like board ? Here's some games. I mean, it could have been something like that, but okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Could have been almost anything, or just a giant question mark on the cover. But I ran across it. Was doing some clean out of my office, moving a bookshelf or something, and I ran across it last fall in this little notebook. And one of the games in particular, I really, really like the concept, but I wanted to make it more relevant for what I'm doing today versus, say, what I was imagining this board game could be 10, actually it's more like 15 years ago. And so I reinvented that game into something that's more on brand, if you will, for where I am today. And so I called it Born to Live, but I took the same rules and applied it to this new concept about being an optimist and being born to live and living on purpose. I took the same rules and just reinvented the game, and I had a blast doing it. I had so much fun thinking about it this fall up until Christmas and organizing it, sketching out what the parts and the pieces and the board itself would look like, created the box cover, all of it, created 6 prototypes to give away as Christmas gifts. I may never do anything else with that game, and I don't care, because it was it was so fulfilling and rewarding for me. And now I have these artifacts, all of that a piece of my imagination at my house, my parents' house, my daughter's homes, and a couple of other places that it's like, oh, it's like the fingerprints of my imagination, whether or not I take it to scale and contact Parker Brothers or, or whatever, it doesn't matter. The imaginative process was so rewarding for me for a couple of months, and ordering, like I said, all these parts and pieces and assembling this game and bringing it to life into the world was really rewarding. So it's sharpening the saw of your imagination to set out to create or reinvent something irrespective of where it goes into the marketplace. Like I didn't invent books, obviously, but I have an incredible time using my creative and synthetic imagination to write my own books. And so it's irrelevant that I didn't admit, oh, I'm going to come up with a first bound written tome. No, that's been done for thousands of years. I'm just reinventing it in the way I imagine it. And so it's incredibly rewarding. And I hope that this would just inspire just one person to go and do something with their imagination. If they thought it was dormant or too late for them, no, now is your time.
I'm sorry. I was looking for my copy of Born to Live around my house here for a second. I was just looking for it. That was what I didn't see it here on my table to play with my kids. Anyway, no, look, I agree. So again, as always, Chris, I always ask you to break this down at the end. How do we, what you've said is very aspirational, but how do we apply that? So if somebody is out there feeling like, I used to be creative, or I would like to be more creative, or whatever. So what is your recommendation for them? How do they implement what you've just said? How do we become more creative, more imaginative in our day-to-day lives? How do we do that? What's your suggestion?
I think just first acknowledging that you are a creative person. I can't stand that it's become a noun, like I'm a creative, but just embrace it. So you are an imaginative, creative person. Acknowledge and recognize that, and understand that there's both types of imagination, both types of delivery into the world of something new can come from, like I say, a combination of reinventing something, rearranging something, or whole cloth, out of nowhere creative. So if you take just the book example, if you're going to write a book, it ought to be a bit reinventing what's already existing, because if you're not doing that, then it's probably not going to get published. Even if you self-publish, it probably won't work. But where the creativity comes in is in the story, or the way you tell the story, or whom you're even talking to. So I would say just recognize you are a creative, you are an imaginative person. If you are listening to this, then you have it within you to do something, even if it's for your own sake. And I'd say let go of the outcome. Like I said, my board game isn't designed to go to Parker Brothers and blow them away and scale and outperform Monopoly. Now, if that happened, it wouldn't hurt my feelings, and I would invite you to the launch party, Michael. But it's not what I'm doing it for. And I think sometimes maybe that can get lost in translation a little bit when you're hearing people talk about success is, oh, how is it going to scale? You're going to watch Shark Tank and see somebody pitch a board game. They better have a way to make it scale, or you're wasting their time and you're not going to get their investment. That's not what this is about. This is about you and where you're at right now. Can you get creative where you are for your own sake and see where it goes? But I think it'll impact and affect every part of your life. If you tap into that imagination, I think suddenly you'll become better at work, better at relationships, better at money management, better at everything you're doing when you employ your imagination at work, even if it's in a small part somewhere off onto the side. There's probably something you always wanted to do as a kid. Go for it. Now's the time. It's never been easier to create right now in human history. Now's the time.
And some work is creative. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love what I do with radio sales and advertising, is because I get to create things, ideas, concepts, commercials, those kind of things. But even for folks who are just, 9 to 5 punching a clock doing accounting or HR or something that I would imagine would be, to me, immediately boring, and life sucking. There are other things. Like I said, I mean, I I went out and started doing something new a couple of years ago on my own, this crafting thing. It could be something like that. It could be woodworking. It could be metallurgy. It could be painting or drawing or just writing and journaling. I mean, creating stories for yourself, if for no one else. That's the thing. There's so much pressure. Oh, I'm going to be a writer. Well, some people just write for themselves. They write short stories, and if they ever get published, great. If not, they got pen to paper and they did it. I mean, you can find something. And like you said, maybe it's not for anybody. I remember the second piece that I ever created. I created this really cool diorama. And I had no idea what I was doing with it to begin with, but I had this idea. And so I started doing it and I got done. And I thought this would be perfect for a friend of mine who loves this kind of theme. And so I ended up just giving it to them. I mean, I poured probably 20 hours into this thing and I just gave it to them because I'm done with that. I'm moving on to something else. They would appreciate it. There's always something creative that you can do somewhere, sometime. You just got to find it.
And they sold that on eBay, but you didn't care.
Oh, they probably threw it away. They probably it's probably in the bottom of some landfill somewhere. Yeah, right now. But
I love it though. That it's for yourself. The Twin Peaks of Imagination. It's really for you. And if others get the benefit out of it, great. Can you imagine and maybe your grandfather did this, but what if your grandfather had written a book, not to publish, but just written something that you get to read now, or your great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather? So what are you leaving behind? What are the fingerprints of your imagination that will be left, the artifacts that you're leaving for the next and the following and the third and fourth generations from now? What fingerprints will be behind to say that you were here, and your imagination is a big part of it?
The Twin Peaks of Imagination: synthetic imagination, creative imagination. Napoleon Hill was a genius. If you haven't read his books, you probably should. Think and Grow Rich,
Mm-hmm.
Master Key to Riches. He's got a lot of different books out there. Chris, thank you, my friend. His book, by the way, Chris Story's book, The Backyard Millionaire, is available right now at ilovehomeralaska.com. I'm currently working on his second Jacob Mann series book. I just started this weekend a little bit, setting down some lines to try and get a feel for it. It'll be available on Audible sometime in the near future, but it'll also be available in print. He's got all kinds of stuff going on. Chris, final thoughts before I let you go quickly.
Oh, Michael, I just appreciate you having me here and what you do for the state and your conversations with Brad and all the other about the legislature, that each of us, and just a reminder every day, each of us have an opportunity to make an impact on our government, which is of the people, by the people, for the people, and that's you. And so I want to thank you for bringing that conversation to us every morning.
Well, I appreciate it. Chris Story, the man from Homer, inspiring me in many ways, and I appreciated that. I mean, I got something out of it, so that's all that matters right now. That's right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Folks, we're up against the break. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, in the break, Chris Story, final thoughts. I mean, same thing happens. Like I said, I wonder, Chris, and I talked about this last week, and maybe you can give me some insight since you've been doing radio for a while as well. I ranted the other day. I woke up on a Monday. I was grumpy, which is not my normal state. In that day, I was not a happy person. I came on the thing and I basically just said, okay, I'm going to rant about stuff. And I did. And quite honestly, I got several comments, emails, people who stopped me when I was in Homer, people who stopped me in Soldotna, said, I really enjoyed your whatever epic rant. And I wonder, does that do more harm than good sometimes? Because I don't necessarily want to be the ranty guy, on the radio. I want to come up with solutions. I want to be thought-provoking on stuff like that. And that, I guess to me, it's not as imaginative. Anybody can get up there and just rant about something all the time. I mean, what do you think as a radio host and a betterment guru?
Well, I think you're doing a couple things. You're combining your passion for something with your humanity. You're a human being. It must be exhausting and frustrating to see over the years having to say the same thing repetitively and seemingly elect new people, new neighbors that go to our capital and then fall under the shadow of what my friend Don Catagno called they just lose their minds. And so you see this repetitively and over again. You're just a human being. You've got ideas. You are a conduit for these ideas. And once in a while, of course, you're going to rant and react in that way, which is in and of itself creative because of the way you're doing it. And also you do point towards more solutions than problems, in my opinion. I could be biased on that, but I feel like you're more of a solution guy who every now and then feels like you have to shake the tree a little bit, see if anybody's awake or listening. So no, I think the whole process is interesting. I think the mistake you could make personally, not for your program, but for you, the mistake you could make is the outcome. If you tie your purpose and meaning to the outcome of your prescriptions for the solutions, then you're going to end up pulling your hair out and just really
that's the danger.
frustrated.
I mean, that's the danger, though, isn't it? Because I'm personally invested in trying to make these things because that's become my purpose in a lot of ways. One of my chief major purposes is to try and initiate change in the state. And when it doesn't happen, hope deferred makes the heart sick, right? That's the proverb. And so I have a hope to make these changes. And if it just keeps, yes, I wake up some mornings and, occasionally throughout the year and I'll just be like, I just want to kick a cat. I just want to be like, I'm so done with all this stuff because nothing is changing. You know what I mean? And so you're right. It's hard to separate that out. What I'm talking about from who I am or what I'm doing, because it's frustrating sometimes when you could see it. You feel like you can see it. You can see the truth. You could see where things are going. And quite honestly, over the last 20 years, I have been prognosticating almost everything that has happened in the last 20 years. This is what's going to go on if we keep building it, if we keep spending, and yet I feel like I'm pissing into the wind, you know what I mean? And I don't know why I'm wet, but it just keeps happening all the time, right? I feel that way.
Yeah. And I think, again, if you tie yourself to the outcome, that's the way you'll feel until you quit doing this. Whereas if you just start maybe a different metric, the metric is, did you influence one person to maybe run for office who otherwise wouldn't have, or to vote, or to reach out to their legislators and speak their mind and realize they have a voice. So if that becomes your mission and your outcome is just to engage people and help them engage with their government and understanding it. Richard Dreyfuss has taken a huge creative risk, but also professional risk by speaking so eloquently about civics. I don't know if you watched his Firing Line special the other night with Margaret Hoover, but he's really just putting himself out on a limb because he cares so passionately about education in civics and the lack of civility in civics and the lack of that being taught at a primary and secondary level, that he's willing to kind of risk his career and say some things that are pretty meaningful to a lot of us out there. But he better not put his hopes on making a stark change today.
Right.
He's at 75. He may not live long enough to actually see his dream coming to fruition. It may take a number of years to turn the tanker around.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I came to a conclusion many years ago that all I can do is be the town crier and then turn back around when I turn the microphone off and make sure my own life is right, and just get ready, because just act like nobody's listening. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what you got to do.
What's that?
Just, yeah, exactly. Chris Story, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on board as always. It was a good discussion today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Bring it home, buddy.
Bring it home. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Chris Story, the man from Homer. I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe we'll just keep chatting about that. Maybe I'll open the phone lines. Here we go. Okay. So here we are, one final segment for the show today. I always feel very introspective when I get done with Chris. You know, I had a thing where I was going to talk about this when I got done with Chris, and then I end up thinking about it and like, no, I want to be more introspective for a moment. I was surprised last week after I had my, I was going to say my very good, no bad day. That's not what it was. I had a great day on Monday when I came on and said, you know, that it was I was in a mood, you know, et cetera, and I wanted to talk about some things, and I ended up ranting about some stuff because I was agitated, because I was in a bad mood about things, you know, about just being frustrated in many aspects. Specifically in, you know, coming on here and seeing what was going on. I had some time over the weekend to kind of contemplate. This was a week ago Monday, just for those of you who it wasn't yesterday, it was a week ago Monday. Just kind of contemplate, you know, what I've been doing and what we've been doing with the show and everything else. And I was a little frustrated because, again, I have been doing this radio show in one form or another for 24 years now. And you know, that I was just feeling like, man, I'm not getting through to people. I mean, I almost basically predicted everything that was going to happen over the last 20 years as I've continued to say, if we don't stop this, this is what's going to happen. If we don't stop this, and it just kept happening. Things just kept going down the road the way that I said they would. And, you know, so I got a little frustrated and I ranted a little bit, but I don't like being that guy. I don't want to be the guy that's the angry radio all the time kind of thing, right? And what Chris was just telling me and talking to me about triggered kind of just a little bit of thought of that. It was funny because I actually received more comments via email and in the chat rooms, and actually in person. I ran into several people this weekend when I was down in the peninsula, listeners who came out to meet me at the coffee things, but also I got stopped a couple times on the street while I was driving around getting gas, whatever. And people said, boy, I really, I really enjoyed your rant last Monday or whatever. And, I just realized sometimes that this, and I think Brian may have hit on it when he basically said that when you rant, it means something because you're not the perpetual ranter, basically. And maybe that's it or anything else, but I want to find more creativity in what we do. This show for me is therapeutic because I want to talk about a lot of these issues, but I discovered that there is more to life than what we do here on the radio. And several years ago, for my own sanity, it's probably closer to 15 years ago, for my own sanity, at one point, I basically had to make a decision that I am going to be the town crier. I'm going to talk about everything that we talk about. I'm going to point out the foibles and the flaws where I see them. I'm going to try and offer some kind of solution if I can. But when the microphone gets turned off, I'm going to go back and focus on my family, my things. I'm going to make sure that my life is right and that I'm prepared for any eventuality, just in case my words mean nothing. Just in case my words don't move the needle at all, I'll make sure that my family is taken care of, happy, ready, prepared, whatever it takes for all those kind of things. And that's kind of become the last 15 years. That's kind of become my shelter from a lot of the madness that's out there. Because I'll be honest with you, if I kept doing the show the way that I did it for the first 10 years, I probably would be screaming at the radio every day, screaming into this microphone every day. Maybe it'd be a very popular show because that seems to be a big thing for many of the big hosts is maybe that would have made me more popular. Definitely would not have made me happy because I just want to point out the problems, give you some solutions, have some conversations with you, and then go back and be with my family. That's kind of the thing. And this creativity thing that Chris was just talking about made me think about that I found some of the most joy in like I said, I gave away my first big project that I did for myself. I envisioned maybe putting it on a shelf somewhere or something, a big diorama that I built, but I ended up giving it to somebody else, and that was almost even better. Just giving some of that creativity away. So I'm hoping you got something out of what Chris said. I did. And I'm hoping that you guys got something out of that as well. But it led me to ask some questions about what I want to continue to do on the show. Now, obviously, during the legislative session and when things are hot and heavy, this is an important thing. We need to focus on those things and have guests on that talk about those things. But I had a really good response from the interviews that I did with Mark Cameron, who is the Alaskan author that writes for the Clancy estate, and the author, and I've forgotten his name right off the top of my head, of the Alaskan Blonde book, the Alaska true crime mystery book. Had some good responses from listeners on that. And I think I want to do more. I want to talk to more people who are creative about that, who live here, who work here. I want to do some different segments on different things. Working on right now. I never knew it would be this hard to get people to come on and talk about certain things. Getting on right now, hopefully, Andrew Jensen, who is with the governor's office, to talk about the food sustainability report that they just put out. We'll talk about sustainable foods. I got a call yesterday from the owner of Atlas Survival Shelters to talk about preparedness, and he said he'd be willing to come on and talk about it. I want to talk about, maybe Alaska gardening, maybe, I don't know, just a little bit of everything, just something good that's creative, something that we can do to discuss something outside of the realm of politics. And maybe that makes the viewership goes down. I don't know. Maybe that makes the listenership drop off. Maybe it's not as interesting to you because you guys are here for red meat politics and nothing else. But, I just love having different folks on. I love talking to people about different things and different ideas. And the politics stuff is important. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes you just got to bring other folks on to do different things. So maybe I'll do a poll on the Facebook page. And lay out a couple different topics that are non-political. And if you want to vote on it, I'll put the poll out today. And if you want to vote on it, you can feel free to do so. Maybe help me find a little bit of a better balance between politics and life and good stuff and everything else. So it's been on my mind. It's been on my mind because, again, I've been saying a lot of the same things for 20 years. Some of you are listening. We're making some difference, but maybe it's not enough. And so maybe we need to just keep pumping the pump, but at the same time, feeding our soul on other things as well. So just a thought. All right. We will be back with more tomorrow. Mike Shower will be our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Alaskan chicken ranching. That could be a topic. That'd be interesting. We love, my wife and I loved our chickens. When we lived in Fairbanks, we had chickens. It was an amazing thing. Can you do a segment on baking? Harold probably having a problem with his sticky buns. Well, proper wiping will fix that. I'm just of the buns. Never mind. I don't know. We'll find something to do together. Red Meat Radio gets listeners, though, says Hawk. Well, yeah. But, how does it affect the host? I can't divorce myself from what I feel enough when I'm doing the show to just be like, I can red meat rant all day long and then go out and just be laissez-faire. I can't. It's because it's a part of me, right? It's what I do. And interesting. So I'll come up with some ideas. I'll just come up with some ideas. We need a food security segment on Firearms Friday. I'd say we just give food security and general safety and preparedness ideas, it could have its own day at this point. At least a couple days a month, maybe. Something like that. Anyway, I'm going to think about it. I'll come up with some kind of poll. We'll put it together. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Have a good day, my friends. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Well,